Abla şu an lütfen siz kendinizi düşünün. Başka bir şey görmüyorum ben.
An earthquake kills tens of thousands of people, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless in Turkey and Syria.
We don't know if they are alive or dead, but mostly dead bodies come out now.
From rescue to recovery and survival amid the rubble. Now, on the Inside Story, Earthquake.
Hi, I'm Anita Powell, VOA White House correspondent. It was 4:17 Monday morning, February 6th, when the earth shook in south central Turkey and northern Syria. The magnitude 7.8 earthquake was followed by a 7.5 magnitude aftershock 9 hours later. The death toll is more than 40,000 people. Rescue operations are shifting to recovery efforts as families grimly watch and pray. The epicenter was 33 kilometers west of Gaziantep, a major city in an area of more than 2 million people. The big aftershock was centered around 80 kilometers north, near the ancient city of Kahramanmaraş, an area with about 1 million people. Getting help to survivors has been hampered by geography and war. Dorian Jones begins our coverage from Istanbul.
For many earthquake survivors, the painful wait continues for loved ones still buried in collapsed buildings as rescuers race against time to find survivors.
Two of our relatives are under the rubble. They still could not take them out. So we are waiting. We don't know if they are alive or dead, but mostly dead bodies come out now. Some come out alive, but not many. We are waiting. God should not make anyone experience such a thing.
Successes still occur. 6 days after the quake, a U.S. search and rescue team dug out a survivor, part of a growing global effort to help. But with over 7,000 buildings destroyed and many more uninhabitable, shelter is of critical importance, with the region in the grip of bitter sub-zero temperatures. For many, just staying warm is a daily struggle.
I applied, but no one gave me a tent. I'm taking care of orphan children. The front of my house was utterly cracked. We were afraid to go back there. There are some places to shelter from the cold, like mosques, schools, and condolence houses, and these are the places we have been staying.
Many remote villages where temperatures drop to minus 20 Celsius are only now starting to receive assistance, thanks in many cases to local support groups. Neighboring Syria, too, is only now starting to receive aid. AIDS groups warn assistance is desperately needed in the rebel-controlled Idlib province that was devastated by the quakes.
The delay in accessing the aids and the humanitarian aids through the borders increased the vulnerability, increased the crisis which is affecting the people over there. These medical supplies is approaching to be finished, and also the logistic supplies for the civil defense are approaching to finish, including diesel for the equipments and vehicles for evacuation.
In Turkey, international assistance is picking up as the government faces criticism over the speed of its response to the disaster. Those in shelters contemplate the painful reality they face.
We are staying with 4 families in this tent. We have no heating, we have nothing. You can see this is all we have.
Survivors in Turkey and Syria face the prospect of having to rebuild with nothing, at a time when so many are grieving the loss of their loved ones. Dorian Jones, VOA News, Istanbul.
Turkey's government estimates the quake has cost $50 million in damage. A Turkish business group puts the number closer to $80 million. Help is coming in from all corners in all kinds of ways, from clothing to food to heavy construction equipment to individuals volunteering their time.
Kardeşimin binası çökmüştü. Çok şükür onlar da kurtulmuşlardı.
Many of our neighbors died. We are so sad and wish to recover. We wish Turkey will recover. People are still under the rubble, and we are already mourning. God bless those who died and bring healing to the injured.
İçeride şu an kayınvalidem ve kayınpederim var. Enkaz altındalar. Yani ben buraya dün geldim.
My mother and father-in-law are inside under rubble. I got here yesterday and there was no one here. There were no rescue teams. I went up by myself, took a look, walked around. I saw bodies and we pulled them out from under the rubble. Some without heads. There's everything, believe me, it's all there. If you ask people which building in Hatay wouldn't collapse, they'd all point to this one. But this is the one that's in the worst shape. We have Ukrainian guests who fled the war, and they are also laying inside. We have had no contact.
Eight family members were missing. We pulled out 4 and buried them with our own hands. The civil defense rescued 3, and there is still a girl under the rubble, and until now, we don't know anything about her. Today I went to the hospital and asked the father. He said, "My little daughter, who is 14 years old, is she still under the rubble? She hasn't been pulled out?" I said, "Not yet." He said, "She was sleeping in the bedroom alone."
Cold.
Can you put that thing?
Still. Oh, maşallah. Merador. Yap. Merra, davran kruid. Samarugan. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Bebek nefes almakta zorlanıyor. Tamam.
I was sleeping that time. Just I see something shaking. I heard my wife say, earthquake.
Today, I'm announcing that the United Nations is launching a $397 million humanitarian appeal for the people of earthquake-ravaged Syria. And this will cover a period of 3 months. We all know that life-saving aid has not been getting in at the speed and scale needed. The scale of this disaster is one of the worst in recent memory. 1 week after the devastating earthquakes, millions of people across the region are struggling for survival, homeless, and in freezing temperatures. We are doing all we can to change this, but much more is needed. And I have an urgent message to the international community. The human suffering from this epic natural disaster should not be made even worse by man-made obstacles. Access, funding, supplies. aid must get through from all sides to all sides through all routes without any restrictions.
تعي لعند خالك تعي يلا تعي يا ابو تعي ابو امير تكبير الله اكبر ابو امير الله اكبر شوي بس على الشارع شوي على الشارع عملك هي الوحيده اللي عايشه تكبير
VOA's Turkish and Kurdish services are on the ground in Turkey and Syria, trying to bring audiences there the latest information about rescue and recovery efforts, along with where survivors can find help.
There was a clear lack of coordination by the government, the local authorities, like the governors, the local rescue groups, local branches. They were not mobilized fast enough by the government. The situation on the ground is difficult. There's a serious problem of sheltering. Many people, as I said, are homeless. They lost their homes. They live outside on the streets. Even if their building is safe, they prefer living outside, either in the tents or especially a significant number of people staying overnight in their cars. So there will have to be an effort, a serious effort. Maybe it will take years of rebuilding effort from right now.
I want to talk about the political fault lines that go through this region. I'm talking about conflict across the border. I'm talking about allegations of repression both in Syria and in Turkey. Why does that matter? Why does that make the impact of a natural disaster like this any different?
Well, I should say this is the first test of a big natural disaster. How Erdogan would handle a natural disaster in such a big scale after he implemented the presidential system in Turkey. This is the big one. So we will see how he will handle. But as of right now, until right now, there's. We can clearly say that he did not make a good beginning.
Can I ask you just about the presence of a large number of Syrian refugees in this area? How is this resonating for that community and also for Syrians in Syria who are seeing this happen to their relatives?
Yes, there is the disparity in distributing the aid, but if you look at the Syrian side, one thing actually our stringers talk with the Syrians in the region. The Gaziantep especially you can see as the capital of Syrian refugees. There are a significant number of Syrian refugees there. They're like, how can I describe? They're saying that our country during the war had already collapsed on our heads, and now here the same thing happened. Turkey also collapsed on our head. We ended up being crushed under the rubble in both countries. And also in Turkey, maybe not from the political level, but when we look at the reaction attitude of Turkish people against the Syrian refugees, there's been an increasing level of animosity. When we look at the people's reaction, when we look at the social media posts, like, for example, there is a far-right party in Turkey, Victory Party. When we look at this party's leaders' statements now, we can see that there is, at least from some circles, there is a negative campaign going on against Syrian refugees.
For refugees who fled Syria's civil war, the earthquake adds yet another challenge for a group of people already beset with challenges. For Mersin, Turkey, our Arif Aslan tracks a Syrian refugee family who are once again facing hard times.
Muhammad Bako and his family had no choice but to flee the Turkish city of Hatay, one of the areas hit hardest by the earthquakes on February 6 that has left thousands of people dead in Turkey and Syria. Originally from the northwestern Syrian province of Idlib, Beko and his family moved to Turkey in 2013 after fleeing civil war in their country. The quake had a devastating impact on the Beko family, like so many other residents of Hatay.
The entire house was destroyed. My father and aunt remained under the rubble. We kept digging for 3 hours to get them out. My aunt lost her life, God bless her soul, but my father survived. Thank God he's fine.
After 3 days, Beko decided to move his family to the city of Mersin, which has been spared the devastation of the earthquake.
We left the city because there were still aftershocks. While there, we stayed under a tent for 3 days. It was very cold, and my children couldn't bear it. With every aftershock, my children got more terrified.
While they feel safe in Mersin, the family has been living on the street with no place to stay. With processing the scale of the devastation and grieving for the loss of his loved ones in Turkey and Syria, Beko says the future is uncertain once again. For Arif Aslan in Mersin, Turkey, Sirwan Kejo, VOA News.
Among the first responders to this catastrophe is a search and rescue team from Fairfax County, about 10 kilometers from here. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias tells us they are joining others from the U.S. who are trying to help.
Syrian refugees in Turkey and those who have been displaced in northwest Syria are among the most vulnerable and have the greatest need for food and other assistance. The United States has joined several other nations to support relief efforts.
We are in the process of deploying additional teams to support Turkish search and rescue efforts and address the needs of those injured and displaced by the earthquakes. U.S.-supported humanitarian partners are also responding to the destruction in Syria.
Mobilized by USAID, the Fairfax County Urban Search and Rescue Team prepped for deployment to Turkey.
We have about 60,000 pounds of equipment here. We're loading 79 people with 6 dogs.
Health concerns will also need to be addressed, notes the U.S.-based humanitarian organization Project Hope.
Whether that be waterborne diseases or airborne diseases that are spread through communities that are now living very in close proximity in shelters. You will have a number of different disease vectors that will arise after the first few days of a disaster.
For those who want to help, the nonprofit Global Giving has some advice.
Cash is first and foremost the most important way to donate. And that is because the needs on the ground fluctuate so quickly. Look at the organizations on Charity Navigator in order to be able to verify that that is a trusted charity entity.
Humanitarian workers say it could take weeks for the emergency in Turkey and Syria to move to the recovery phase. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
Among the challenges facing the hundreds of thousands left homeless by the earthquake is managing through winter temperatures. While it rarely gets that cold in Los Angeles, a mobilization is underway to get warm clothing and other essentials to those who need it. Details from LA and our Angelina Bagdasarian.
Since early morning, Los Angeles residents have been bringing humanitarian aid, including warm clothes and other essentials, to this mosque so that it can be sent to Turkey and Syria.
We are collecting winter clothes for Turkish people. As we know that Turkey has a really big disaster, and at this point, any humanity, either Muslim or non-Muslim or different faith, if they get hurt, we feel that we are getting hurt. So we are helping each and every person.
We at this masjid respond very kindly. And I have seen some clothes here that are summer clothes. What we need most are blankets and winter clothes like this.
Residents throughout California are stepping up with aid for earthquake survivors across the ocean. Nurdan Sivi is a singer and a volunteer in Northern California. For years, she's been collecting money to help Turkish children to get an education.
Maybe instead of sending kids to school, giving them scholarships, maybe we're going to use the funds to build new schools. So we will use the funds for maybe more essential needs.
Businessman Murat Karslioğlu has sent all the trucks from his firm to transport humanitarian aid from collection centers to the airports in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Most boxes contain warm clothing and hygiene essentials for women and small children.
the only thing we can do from here, providing them things to help them survive, blankets, tents again, and because they will go through difficult next 3-6 months at least, and then after that, recovery will take at least 1 year, maybe longer than that.
U.S. rescue teams, along with their search dogs, are also on the way to help, and they're taking tons of humanitarian aid with them. Californians know all too well about this kind of catastrophe. The state itself is situated on the very active San Andreas Fault, making the region susceptible to powerful and dangerous earthquakes. For Angelina Bagdasaryan in Los Angeles, California, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Before we go, a development here in the United States that has raised more questions than answers. Less than a week after the U.S. downed what officials say was a Chinese surveillance balloon, the U.S. military shot down 3 more flying objects of unknown origin. Chinese officials say they can't say whether the newly downed objects are theirs, but say the U.S. is overreacting. Amid the questions, one thing is clear. China-U.S. relations have taken a hit. There are many questions about the 3 unidentified flying objects the U.S. military has shot down in as many days. Here's one thing the White House can say with confidence.
There is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that, all of you knew that, and it was important for us to say that.
But seriously, White House officials offered one theory on why the military is suddenly finding more of these flying vessels. Because these are the objects they're looking for.
If you set the parameters in such a way that to look for a certain something, it's more likely that you're going to find a certain something.
On Friday, less than a week after downing a Chinese balloon over the eastern shore of the United States, the U.S. military shot down a UFO over Alaska. The U.S. worked with the Canadian military to take down another over the Yukon Territory. And on Sunday, a third was shot from the sky into Lake Huron. People should not panic, Kirby said.
We do not assess that these most recent objects posed any direct threat to people on the ground, and we are laser focused on confirming their nature and purpose.
But if the truth is out there, it's clouded by China's anger over what they say is unfair U.S. punishment for a weather balloon that simply drifted off course and across the entire continental U.S. On Monday, China's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin accused Washington of being trigger-happy. He did not say whether the 3 recent objects were Chinese, but fired a volley of accusations at Washington.
The U.S.'s abuse of force, overreaction, and escalation of the situation goes against the spirit of international law and against international practice. Now they are hyping up, exaggerating, and exacerbating the situation, using this as an excuse to illegally sanction Chinese enterprises and organizations. China is strongly dissatisfied and firmly opposes this.
The White House said there is no current plan for President Joe Biden to talk to Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Kirby said the Chinese military is not interested in speaking to the U.S. Defense Secretary. He also repeated claims that the U.S. does not have surveillance aircraft in Chinese airspace. That, says analyst Emily Harding, sets up tension with Beijing and raises serious questions for Washington, questions that Kirby could not answer when asked on Monday.
I think the messages that are sent to Beijing is, hey, we caught you, we know what you're up to, cut it out. I think the more interesting question right now for the Pentagon is going to be, what are the rules of engagement on these? Suddenly we've found these objects that are floating over the northern United States, and are we going to try and shoot down every single one of them that floats over the airspace, or are we going to come up with a much better way of determining what is and is not a national security threat?
And she said the conspiracy theories floating around the internet raise another concern.
When we have so little information out in the public, it's very easy for misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories to spread. There's been some, I think, well-intentioned joking about this on the interwebs over the weekend, but at the same time, like, you don't really know and you don't want to speculate and spread potential mis and disinformation.
Which leaves the biggest question of all. Once investigators learn what the objects are and what they were doing, what then? Stay up to date on that story, the earthquake recovery, and the rest of the news at voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News, and follow me on Twitter at 6armspowell. Catch up on past episodes on our free streaming service, VOA+. I'm Anita Powell. See you next week for The Inside Story.